Namaskar, Professor K.K. Agrawal ji, Chairman of National Board of Accreditation. Thanks for joining us, Agrawal ji. Great to see you. May I request you to unmute your mic? Great to see you. I don't know if you like remember me. I used to.
Yeah, I remember you very well, and we wanted to interact more closely several times, but
Yes.
more from my side, we had to miss many times. But therefore, this time I've cut short the previous function just to join you because I thought this time I must join you. So nice of you. So
And
nice.
honored, sir. I have been knowing you for the last 15 years, and when we started our journey for digital learning,
Yeah.
I remember like you are aware our one of the very important inspirations. I used to always get inspired by your lecture. So really an honor to have you here, sir.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you for joining us. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Yes, and we have with us Lieutenant Colonel Kailash Bansalji, who's director from director of AICT. Welcome, Bansalji. Thanks for joining us. Namaskar. So, without much ado, and here I have our colleague Abhishek Tomar, who is also with us, who will be here with us to help us in the sessions. So, welcome Abhishek, and welcome all the audience who are watching us here on Zoom and also on our social media. And the context of this conference is that we are all seeing that how the COVID-19 situation is unfolding every day, and it is impacting all the segments of the society, and higher education is not unaffected by this. It is a higher education has been, and school education and all forms of education have been hugely affected and hugely impacting the way students are learning, the way teachers are teaching, and the whole administration and exams are uh, being held or going to be held. So let me start with our first keynote speaker of the inaugural session, Lieutenant Colonel Kailash Bansalji, requesting you to deliver your keynote address on the impact of the COVID-19 on higher and technical education, and how and what is the way forward. Kailash, over to you.
Thank you, Ravi Gupta ji. Thank you very much for calling me over. Firstly, my due regards and respect to Dr. Agarwal sir. Sir, Jai Hind, if you remember me, sir.
No, sure, certainly.
Thank you, sir. I'm thankful for Ravi to have actually called me over and to share the panel along with Professor Agarwal. I mean, like we are very lucky indeed to have him along with us today. And I will only request sir to kindly fill in my shoes. Should I say something wrong, please correct me.
Oh, no, certainly no.
I look forward to your guidance as ever before, sir.
Thank you so much.
COVID-19 is no incident that it has impacted us in all walks of life. Education is not something very different that has come out of the way or out of the context. More, in fact, more than life, the livelihoods have got affected. We are all living, but the livelihoods have gone. So to that extent, I'm like there is no let up in saying that Corona has got everybody by surprise and for the worst part of our lives that we are seeing in these times. As far as I'll restrict the introduction only towards education side, and we'll quickly move towards the education part of it. Higher education, yes. While we were somewhere around the middle of the last semesters or odd semester, correction, even semesters, it got impacted. And most of the studies, while as they were in the progress, were actually just halted as and where it was. Needless to say as much that most of the students who were actually getting back after their vacations and midterms, they were all lo behold just stuck wherever they were. Colleges, universities had to just shut down, and there came the opportunity of, or rather the leveraging of digital technologies. I already see two questions in the question answers box saying that how it has impacted and what are we doing about the technology part of it. Well, I'll just come to that point a little bit later, but we have to just see two aspects of education, at least the higher education. And I'm sure this, what I'm going to say will actually spill over towards the school education side as well. Please consider what education is. Is education, are you thinking education as a service, or are you thinking as education as a product? If you're thinking education as a product, well, you just have to package it and sell it. But unfortunately, in my consideration, education is not a product. It is more of a service. If we consider, there can be counter arguments to that also. How education, I can argue for education as a product as well. But I consider more education as a service because it's got all the elements which qualifies it as a education as a service. Now, if education is a service, then there are three major components in any service. First is the education as a service provider, who is the consumer, and the service as such. And the long of short is we all know who these three components are. But there is a fourth component, which is a hidden component, which actually we tend to just take it for granted, which is the service enabler. Now, if we call a service enabler and think about it, in our conventional system, in our traditional system, the service enablers were the classrooms, the pedagogy skills, the laboratories, the workshops. They were all the components of service enablers. When I say service enablers, educational enablers. Gradually, these educational enablers have been overtaken by the digital platform. Now, if we consider digital platforms as such, well, I'm actually considering, I'm making a very bold statement. Digital doesn't mean zeros and ones. Education is not zeros and ones. It has to be a journey of converting zeros into ones. Who are zeros, they have to be converted into ones. And the entire process, the length of process that goes, is a discovery by itself for that student, for that particular peer, for even the teachers as well. So the digital transformation, that the topic that you have chosen is a very apt one, is a very relevant one. And Corona has only precipitated. I'm sure we all have done titrations in our school days where, you know, you put some acid and put something, and the entire thing was put some catalyst, and the entire thing came down and precipitated. Well, the same thing has happened with, or has been forced upon by, you know, nature, Mother Nature, by this coronavirus, COVID pandemic, and has been precipitated to adopt this digital transformation in our education as a service model. Having said that, digital also imposes certain other factors, such as maybe a big factor is the psychological factor, where the student disconnect with the teacher, with the faculty is definitely there. It is very easy for all of us, and including the body like AICT possibly, to just issue out regulations and issue out guidelines. For one, I am at times in discussion with our honorable chairman and member secretary also, saying that, sir, we have to really enable the environment, and they are also seized of it. Let me tell you, we are working overtime on this issue as to how we can enable our students and colleges and stakeholders to leverage the digital technologies and digital platforms. The point which I am making is that though guidelines we have given out, though we have issued certain circulars, but we are all seized of this matter that there is a criticality in terms of the service enabler component, that being the internet connectivity, the last mile connectivity, the platform as such where we are using, and hence couple of initiatives which have been taken by AICT in this regards is firstly the NEET platform. AICT has opened the NEET platform in the very initial days of the coronavirus, and we had the NEET 1.0 where a lot of industries, lot of startups, lot of edtech were called over, their products were given. The fact that the Swayam platform is one which is offering almost the entire content except for 1,000 rupees as fees for the examination, and that too refundable if you pass. The edtech companies were kind of feeling let down that where do we sell our products. So NEET platform was created with one condition, that for every 4 seats that you charge for, 1 seat has to be given to the economically backward student. And that is how that platform was created. And now we are in NEET point 2, the EOI expression of interest has already been given out, where more people can come and join. So that was one part. The second is the National Technical Teachers Training. So number of FDPs have been conducted, faculty development programs have been conducted. Our Atal Academies are fully functional online, delivering quality faculty development programs to the faculty, and these two has been enabled. Now, as far as the third component of I'm not covering a larger gambit. I'm only restricting to very, very limited subsets of the entire initiatives that AICT has taken. The third objective of the, uh, the enabling function which AICT has done is giving out notices, giving out small ideathon. MIC had come out with Corona ideathon in somewhere in the month of April and May mid. So we have started giving snippets of competition. We have started announcing certain this thing, so that the students can actually think, the professors, the faculties can actually think and come out of with real-time solution. There is a Utkrish Sansthan Vishwakarma Award which was given out. The notice was given out. There is one more which is in the coming, which will be announced shortly. I should not preempt you what it is, but it will come out shortly. Then during this lockdown period, AICT has actually looked at this stakeholders even more closely. The number of schemes, the funding in the schemes, they have been enhanced. So this is the time where we have worked overtime. Just to give you a last bit of it, the entire approval process that AICT has done this time has been entirely online. Unlike the previous years where the physical visits used to be there, technology was greatly leveraged by AICT, and the entire process was completed in a short span of time. Even before, we did not have to even go to Supreme Court and ask for extra time, apart somewhat few odd cases where it was necessitated, but largely it was done entirely online. So it's not that the digital platforms cannot be used. It is just that, are we ready both in terms of service delivery and service acceptance to take education as a service forward? So I think I finish here, and back to you, Ravi.
Sure, sir. Excellent inputs, and great to see that AICT is actually taking the strides and has taken a lot of digital initiatives in this pandemic situation. And especially glad to see that a lot of regulatory approvals are happening online without the physical visits of the officials. So that's a great progress indeed. And hats off to our MHRD and AICT for being very fast on taking decisions in these times and helping the institutions in tackling these times. So let me request our next keynote speaker, Professor K.K. Agrawal, Chairman of the National Board of Accreditation. And Professor Agrawal is considered one of the doyens of the higher education ecosystem of the country. And so many of the existing vice chancellors and HODs across the country are actually Shishya of Professor Agrawal. So it's a great honor to have you here, sir. And personally, I can't tell you that how much happy to see you after almost a decade. And great to have you, sir. Sir, requesting you to start your speech.
Ravi, how much time?
Sir, you may speak around 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will take some questions of the audience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, friends, I'm so happy to be able to join this conference organized by Dr. Ravi Gupta. As he rightly said, we started interacting when we were working in IP University on GIS and things like that. And that was the first area in which he started. But then he went on a better and broader area of digital learning and has not looked back. So my compliments to him for a very successful knowledge dissemination medium which he has created for itself. Somehow, as I said earlier, I had to miss some of the earlier conferences because of the time constraints and time clashes. So this time I just made sure whatever happens, I will join in. Having said that, I'm too happy to look at the organization of this conference. when Abhishek said of all the keynote speakers, I think it's almost countries who's who, which is being represented in this conclave to a very large extent. And just in lighter vein, it's probably a practical demonstration of online teaching, because we say in online teaching, module should be about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. It should not be a 45, 50 minutes class like in a face-to-face education. So psychologists have researched that in a physical classroom, the attention span of the student could be between 45, 50 minutes, but on an online mode, the real good attention span is just about 15 minutes. And we should convert a lecture into micro modules to be able to be effective. And I see it as a practical demonstration of this being done in this conclave. Thank you very much. Dr. Bansal, whom I know for quite some time in being in AICTE, and several initiatives taken by him at his level in his bureau and AICTE in general. I mean, hats off to their working and taken the situation created by COVID and even otherwise. I'll just touch on a few topics on post-COVID scenario. Can I start with a small story? And that story is, how do we really make the people believe what we want to say? So there was a person called Zoner. He went to a conference like this and he said, today I want to propose against banning of a chemical. It should be banned. So he says this is a chemical which is called dihydrogen monoxide. I believe most of the people here are science-based. Dihydrogen monoxide is the chemical I propose to be banned. And he says, why I want this to be banned is, number one, it causes severe burns while it is in a gas form. Number two, it corrodes and rusts metal. Number three, it kills countless amounts of people annually. Number four, it's commonly found in tumors, acid rain, etc. Number five, it causes excessive urination and bloating if consumed in excess. Number six, it is able to kill you when you become so much dependent on it and then experience an extended withdrawal. Listening to all these six properties about the proposed chemical, the audience in the conference voted to the extent of 86% that this chemical must be banned. It is such a disastrous chemical, it must be banned, and he got his vote 86%. After he got his vote, he said, well, friends, this is a chemical we just cannot ban. And I have not told anything wrong. I'll prove this. But the point is, how do we present something makes a whole difference to the world. And then he explained, this chemical which I have proposed is nothing but another name of water, dihydrogen monoxide. So will you like to ban water? Everybody said, water is food. Are you talking foolish? How can we ban water? And then he says, I'll repeat my 6 sentences. Causes severe burns when it is in gas form. Am I right? Corrodes and rusts metal. Am I right? Kills countless amounts of people annually. Am I right? It is commonly found in tumors, acid rain. Am I right? Causes excessive urination and bloating if consumed in excess. Am I right? If you become too much dependent on it, deprivation can kill you. Am I right? Now, all these properties are 100% truthful characteristics about water. So this person did not tell anything wrong and got a good 86% vote to ban water. So why I'm trying to tell you this is, we at times become obsessed with something and then believe this is the only way of looking at it. There was a time in the country when we believed technology assisted education is no good. We believed it has to be face-to-face education. How can I produce an engineer who does not attend the classes, who does not attend the laboratories, who does not does the project in the lab, and so on and so forth. So how can engineering, particularly, how can engineering education be done online? And that was true of some other science education, medical education, etc., etc. But COVID forced upon us that we have no other option to go to technology-based education, because if we don't do that, we are just not able to even engage a very large number of students which have been impacted by COVID. And the number world over is 1.6 billion students which are outside the classrooms, whether in school, colleges, or universities. And India also is 33 crore plus, which is outside the classroom. Now, one option is that technology assisted education is no good. So, okay, let's wait for the COVID to be over. Imagine the disasters, additional disasters, which it would have brought if we would have taken this view. Fortunately, we did not take that view. And I must compliment all the bodies like AICT, UGC, and plus all the teaching faculty members across the country, whether at school level, college level, or university level. They rose to the occasion, and within a week, many of them who had never delivered online at all became a reasonably good online deliverers of knowledge, dissemination of knowledge, and delivery of knowledge continue. And we went ahead and kept the students busy. We even helped complete their session. Most of the students did not lose the final year exams and have got their degrees. Others will get it in a few months' time, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to tell you is that a method of education which we believed is no good came to our rescue very strongly. And my now worry is we at times have started believing it is too good. I again feel let us keep our comments reserved. This is a very good firefighting measure. This is a very good crisis solution, but is it a best normal solution? Probably we will have to think about it. We will have to go to a blended mode of education where, depending upon course to course, a subject of history or subject of engineering or subject of medical science may require different teaching pedagogies. All of them may not be very suitable face-to-face. All of them may not be very suitable online. And I feel every subject will have to be delivered in a blended mode. The ratio of blend might change. A law might be delivered 80-20, engineering might be delivered 60-40, medical might be delivered 80-20, and so on and so forth. So we will have to design a good blend ratio for each discipline of education, because 100% face-to-face also will not be possible, even if we so wish, as long as social distancing has to be maintained. Because no institution will have classrooms enough to accommodate all the students which they used to accommodate earlier in the normal classroom structure. So therefore, blended method of education will be one thing to which we all have to get used to and prepare ourselves for that very meaningfully. And that brings me to the subject of teacher empowerment. It will be only the teacher who will be able to decide what can I probably afford to do online, what I would still like to do in the classroom. It probably will be very difficult for a central or a regulatory body to tell that this must be done online, this can be done face-to-face, because some teacher is comfortable in some manner, some teacher is comfortable in another manner. It will again depend upon the regional location of the institution. Some institutions are located in areas where broadband connectivity is still very poor. So how can we do to complete online there? So it will depend upon subject to subject. It will depend upon location of the institution. It will again depend upon the location of the student. A vice chancellor of a very big university in South rang me up and he said, sir, you are talking about online everything. 30% of my students, I can't even send an email. They are not connected at all. So if I can't even send an email to them, how can I conduct exam and all that? Okay, I said then let's not make other 70% wait. Let examination be done 3 times. Heavens are not going to fall. So we have overstretched our imagination that examination question paper must be same for everybody. I think it's for the first time that the teaching faculties and the heads of departments and university administrations have accepted that the examination could be done in several sequential batches by different question papers by trying to moderate their level of difficulty. Otherwise, nobody was prepared to accept this. But so there are new things which have come. We all lived with the notion that the only method of examination is a 3-hour question paper at the end of the semester or at the end of the annual examination. All my research could not give me an answer where from this 3-hour theory came. Why not 2 hours? Why not 4 hours? Why not an examination which can be done only orally? Why not an examination which is enough to be done only practically? Why not a design practical? Why not a you do hackathons where the students do wonders in 36 hours? They don't appear in a theory exam, but they do wonders. Why can't that be taken as an examination? So our whole philosophy of examination will have to change. Incidentally, I read a beautiful article. He says we should assess the students. We shouldn't examine the students, because examination is always against a benchmark. You examine the temperature of a body. Is it 98.4 or not? So examination is against a benchmark. When you assess a student, it has to be not against a benchmark. You have to assess what he or she possibly can do the best. And when we come to attitude searching and attitude-based education, then only we will be able to really serve the society. And I'm not talking only of engineering, I'm talking across the board. We have to provide avenues. I met a student abroad once and I said, what are you studying? He says, sir, I am studying medical science and economics. Now, having been a professor since 1975, 45 years today as a professor, I am unable to imagine how in this country I can help a student learn medical science and economics both at the same time. It is just impossible in our present structure. So I said, why are you studying the two together? He says, sir, I want to improve public health system of the United States of America. And if I want to do that, I must learn medical science and I must learn economics. Therefore, I have enrolled for both these subjects together. Well, friends, even just now, AICT in the last few years have given some interdisciplinary flavor to amongst the engineering subjects. But then synthesis between engineering and management, synthesis between engineering and arts. And today, world does not talk interdisciplinarity as between mathematics and computers, as between physics and electronics. Interdisciplinarity today is talked between music and mathematics, between physics and philosophy. Professor Manjul Bhargava is one example in the world who is the most eminent mathematician, but probably one of the most famous musicians. So the interdisciplinary knowledge and the world's best, one of the world's best universities, Stanford, 2 years ago, started a 5-year degree program on computer science and English, another on computer science and music. So friends, I am trying to say that this COVID is telling us that interdisciplinarity will become all the more important. And I always say, if we would have done the mistake of looking at COVID only as a medical problem, we would have been in complete chaos. COVID had to be seen as a medical problem, plus an economic problem, plus a social science problem, plus a labor problem, plus a transportation problem. Then only we could control it to some measure. Unless we have multidisciplinary approach to the problems, and unless we allow the student to wander about in several areas of interest and learn to give them credit for that. I was talking to a group of industrialists and I said, just as you talk about monetizing everything, I think in universities and education, we'll have to start about creditizing everything. If you have done an excellent service in uplifting a rural area, why can't I give you credit for this? If you have done excellent work in doing something else, why can't I give you credits for that? Why credits should be reserved only for physics, chemistry, mechanical engineering, mechanics, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth? Because these are not the domains which are connected with each other. Artificial intelligence, which we talk about day in and day out, will not be the domain of engineers alone. Artificial intelligence even today is being used more by finance people, more by medical science people than even by computer science people. But tomorrow, artificial intelligence experts, maybe with commerce background, maybe with economics background, maybe with science background, maybe with humanities background, maybe with engineering background. And that's a great opportunity for this country, that several platforms, several first floors can lead to a good second floor. That's a model which I'm looking at, where first degree may lead to several second degrees, and for a particular second degree, you may climb from this side, may climb from this side, may climb from this side. I occasionally say Mount Everest is the peak, but there is not only one way of reaching Mount Everest. In Himalaya, you can try to reach from any side to reach Mount Everest. So that's a training which we'll have to bring to our education scenario. And the type of audience which I have today, I thought I'll just convey this. Let us not be very obsessed with one branch of knowledge all the time. Let's be very open, multifarious, and try to make the student worthy of what he or she is capable of, rather than trying to tell him or her, no, you must pass in this. How can you be a mechanical engineer if you fail in the course of thermodynamics? Well, hell with it. If a 40% in thermodynamics can become mechanical engineer, 38% can also become. So the point is, we will have to make ourselves very flexible. And I see the next generation of education, fortunately because of COVID, will give us a platform where empowerment and flexibility will have to be the name of the game. And in lighter vein, I always say, whenever a computer gets a serious virus, we get an opportunity to reformat it. And in the process of reformatting, we leave much trash. I think COVID virus has given us an opportunity that you have to reformat the society. Previous things will not work. To all of us in education, it has given us a warning. Reformat your computer of education systems. I think we must make use of this opportunity of reformatting and try to relook at everything, question everything what we were doing, and see, can we lead to better situation. I see many better things coming out, and I only hope conclaves like this sensitize this thinking that we have not to go back to status quo. We have to look for future in a different dimension. I wish you all the best, and thank Ravi and his team for giving me an opportunity to interact with such an illustrious gathering. Thank you very much, and all the best. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Agarwal sir. Ravi sir has got some technical glitch. He will just join us. And sir, Agarwal sir, well inputs. You have just highlighted all the key domains and key practicals and the problems that we are facing right now. I think all the audience has get the much knowledge about that, how we can reformat and the reboot the system right now. So there is some questions that we are getting from the audience side that regarding our upcoming trends and the technology usage. So there is one question that next academic year is starting right now. So in this COVID situation, so how we can manage the quality of education by reshaping the next academic year, sir? So may I ask to Sir Bansal sir first that what their best practices we are following for this next academic year to maintain the quality of the education?
Next academic year is actually going to be compressed. It is not that it is going to be regular August or July, August starting initiation, and then continuing till November, and then we'll have exams in December. So it might be a little compressed, but as far as the students who are there in first, second, third year, for them we have a lot of time actually to overcome this crisis situation. We have time, and the lost time can be covered up in subsequent maybe 12 to 18 months. And that is how I see there will be a little extension of possibly, this is just my thought process. We may have some extension of classes stretching up to maybe January, and session finishing off maybe in late December, new admission starting somewhere in mid-January and maybe going on till January end also. So and actually it has been given out by UGC as well, that you can finish off with the exam by 30th of September and then reinitiate the next semester by 15th of October. So the regular classes, yes, there will be a little delay, but we'll have to catch up in the subsequent times and be at it regularly, working round the clock to catch up with the lost time. Now, that is one part of regular studies are concerned. However, when we look at the digital part of it, where we were all, since the forum is such that we can talk about it, well, we already have a lot of course contents on SWAYAM. 20% is already allowed by UGC. And like what Agarwal sir was just talking about, blended learning. Well, we already had this concept of blended flipped classrooms, kind of a thing, where the students used to study in the hostels and come back in the classrooms to have a question answer or a discussion session. Well, that is the way it is going to be more often, and that is the way, the path that that should be adopted in the forthcoming semesters, where more than you have work from home kind of a situation where we are presently now. It will now become FFH, flexible flipped homes and flexible flipped hostels, where the professors will have fixed time slots, or professor will give, okay, this is the schedule, I have these slots available. The faculties, you may engage us during this, and please book your slots. And the students will be at liberty to study and book the slots. And it will be so it will be entirely flipped. The flexibility will be in terms of booking the slots, and the flipping will be of the discussion. As and when the students are ready, please book your slots and come to the faculty for discussion. I think that is the kind of scenario that we are looking at. The other part that in the next academic year is likely to happen, which I am not very sure of this. Maybe we can look at some extension of more number of credits through SWAYAM platforms, maybe more number of courses that can be subscribed through the SWAYAM platform, because that is what MHRD has announced, that you can do 20% as of now. But maybe in the times to come, we can look at 40% as far as technical education is concerned. What sir was just talking about, ratio, yes, there is definitely a game plan. We should evolve to have the ratios enhanced or decreased, or look at it absolutely out of through the glass doors for this part. Now, some of the factors which comes to my mind with respect to the next academic year is with respect to the students and teachers. Come what may, adoption of digital technologies and platforms is going to lead to some kind of a stress, psychological stress, both on teachers as well as students. Because I feel the students will, जैसे बदमाशी होती है, young बच्चों में बदमाशी करने क्या, that part will be missing. And I am, being from the armed forces, I can tell you that if you miss that part, that fun part will actually go. So I would love to go back, like all of us on the panel, and maybe those who are listening, they would definitely want to go back to their classrooms and do that masti again. So that is a great stress buster. When you interact with human to human, that's a great stress buster, I would say. And hence that little aspect would go missing, and which may lead to a little monotonous kind of a schedule. But then even for the teachers, teachers used to scold someone and let out his heart. That part will definitely go missing, which of course he cannot do now, and he cannot actually see through a student and help him. So I think a little physical disconnect is going to be there. We have to be ready for that, and the only way is that we all have to be disciplined in doing a little bit of physical exercise by our own self. So that is one. The second aspect is with respect to the next academic year would be the preparation for self-motivation for joining all these digital platforms, both in terms of students adopting to the new forms of teaching, and more importantly, what Agarwal sir just said, for the teachers. I'm like, hats off to the teachers who have worked overtime and created content, but this is just the beginning. I feel this is just the beginning. And in coming days, it is going to be far more fierce and far more severe. The contents will be adopted by students. If they find that their own professor and faculties are not good enough, they will just switch over to a different university, different college faculty, watch their content, and behind the scene, behind the camera, you will never come to know what content is he actually watching, the student is watching. And hence the accountability part on the teachers, their own self motivation to perform and deliver definitely will have is going to rise. As far as management stakeholders are concerned, well, they have a great role to play here to look forward for new platforms, learning management solutions, the ERP solutions that they want for themselves. And of course, they have to create the kind of enabling environment, like maybe strengthen the network connectivity, have the hostels better, social distancing norms better. So these things are going to be the, I would rather say bane, but at times also, like what Agarwal said, reboot and let it become a boon to us. That is going to be the next academic calendar possible.
Sure.
Thank you.
Excellent inputs, Kailash, and I apologize, sir. Actually, I had some power issue in my area, and the whole thing.
No, no, it's okay.
Yeah. So yeah, let me ask. There's another question about assessment, and the Ms. Uma has asked that assessment rather than examination is a very good idea, but for implementation we need guidelines from AICT for engineering institutions. So I think the question goes to, I think, both from the AICT and also on the MBA. So may I request Professor Agarwal to answer this, that people are talking about assessment or examination. So if like we have to move from examination to assessment, how do we do that? If you can.
Examination to assessment is a little difficult and tricky job, but let me tell you, wherever stakes are high, we have never really believed the examination alone. For example, let's start the most prestigious exam in the country, IAS. Will IAS exam ever accept that there's no interview? And we have only 3 exams and select the IAS officers? Nobody in the country will accept it. And we know interview is always subjective. It has to be subjective. There is no other method. So you have to start believing the evaluators. You have to empower the teachers. You have to empower the evaluators. There is no other method. As a matter of fact, in our race to ensure that there is a uniformity, there is no RTI, there is no this, we have spoiled the system. We just cannot, because some things can be examined by a sort of discussion. I talk to 4 students and I evaluate them. I give them a project and evaluate them. I tell you, I went as chairman to a university to approve them for the deemed university status. It's a good university now, and I'm talking more than 20 years ago. And now they're in the national ranking and everything. When I went there, and they had schools also, they told me very proudly, sir, our students are so good that they have networked our school completely by themselves. So we didn't have to hire an outside agency to network the school. And I laughed. This is what happened. I said, and you as a university are so powerless that you will ask them to study Tannenbaum and appear in the network theory exam. You will not give them credits for the networking subject, at least because they have networked the school. So I see absolutely nothing wrong in doing that. As a matter of fact, I believe we should have been doing that. I visited a college and some 10, 12 boys and girls were in the corridor working on projects. And I just asked them, would you like to work in the laboratory or in the corridor? This is a corridor, sir. Now, if they prefer to work in the corridor, why can't they work at home? And if they bring to me that, sir, during the lockdown, I was very busy and I did this project, what stops me from giving credit for that? We as teachers will say, well, I don't know whether he did it himself or, well, I'm sorry to say, now also many of the students deceive us. They get it done from elsewhere and take marks from us. So some aberrations can always happen, but we will have to, my take is that the next game of education will be flexibility and empowerment. we will have to be very flexible. We will have to empower the institutions. We will have to empower the teachers. We will have to empower the students, because a student is in rural area. He says, sir, what can I do? So I'll have to provide all face-to-face education for him. And for others not. So my take, Ravi, is that we in the system have to be very careful about two words, flexibility and empowerment, and then try to find solutions to those. And some degree of error will be committed in new models, but let me assure you, and I believe we are also committing degrees of error even now, because that is always done. And I personally believe the degree of error in the new system may not be more than the degree of error in the previous system. Somehow we have learned to become comfortable with the previous system. We have to learn to become comfortable with the new system. And I think all of us will have to start with the assumption that we will have to become comfortable with the new systems. And I see a great hope. I mean, I was just reading somewhere, just this 3-hour question paper is costing India alone 6.5 crore trees to be cut every year to produce paper for producing answer books. So if this 3 hour can be made 2 hours, I save 2 crore trees every year. Is it not a small game? I think half of the COVID damage will be undone if I can do that. So why can't, oh, who told me 3 hours? So something like this, we'll have to sort of do out of the box thinking ourselves before we preach too much out of the box thinking. That's my take.
Sure, sure. Excellent inputs, sir. Amazing inputs. Mr. Bansal, your inputs on this question, examination and assessment.
Well, frankly, I really don't have anything to say. I read Tannenbaum and it was all over my head, Agrawal sir. But now I realize that how important was doing the practicals, and the network which I learned built by my own hands, the UTP cabling and everything which I did. Actually, more than Tannenbaum, you can talk about OSPF, you can talk about any routing protocols. It did not matter. What mattered was when I went into the field, when I went into Rajasthan sector doing my exercises, my own boys could not do it. What I could just quickly crimp the tool and and plug it in and play, and off there goes my network. For the first time in Rajasthan sector, what we did, but no Tannenbaum came to my help, sir, frankly. So I truly second what Agrawal sir has just said. There is a component, but with a little bit of criticality, yes, the examinations may be there, but we have to look at experiential learning. Where are we going? If we are not looking at experiential learning and we are only looking at theoretical part of it, both goes hand in hand. But time has come where skill-based learning, time has come where during this COVID pandemic, if you don't know how to sew your own mask, I'm sorry, we won't survive. The only way our universities and faculties and other people rose to the occasion was because they had that experiential component inbuilt into their system. They could prepare the PPE masks, use the 3D printers and what have you to quickly rig up. The entire economy could, be surplus on PPE kits and masks and everything and start exporting. Is only because of this reason that we had our experiential learning component inbuilt into the system and we survived. If we did not have those and we only had bookish knowledge, but the proof of pudding is, yes, we all see it. We have just experienced this part. But the proof of pudding is ultimately we are only going back and asking कि 3 साल का 3 घंटे का exam दे दो 40% 50% number ले आओ and you become an engineer. No, sorry. That glass ceiling has to break. I truly agree with what Agrawal sir has said. Nothing more than that.
Right. Another interesting question is here that can we consider Coursera courses for credits similar to SWAYAM? Is it possible? Agrawal sir.
Ravi, I mean, I'll not be able to comment on this in any official capacity, but personal capacity, yes. As a matter of fact, I as an individual will like to analyze now how many of our students, they took online teaching from our teachers and all that, but still many of them involved in Coursera courses, edX courses as an add-on courses. So that means there was a student was still feeling a vacuum outside the university courses that he went to Coursera and edX. I think it is our duty to collect all this database, what our students tried to learn beyond the universities and the college curriculum, and try to incorporate it. And if I can look at the Coursera syllabus and everything, their pedagogy, personally, I feel, again, personally, I am putting a caveat, very strong caveat, because I know this country's hierarchies and bureaucracies. I am even thinking, as a board of accreditation, I might be, today, you know, we do not accredit institutions, we accredit only programs. I am thinking next stage, maybe we accredit courses. Mathematics from Coursera is wonderful. Any student does it is okay for us. Physics from edX is okay. Any student does, it's okay for us. And that is where I think Mr. Kailash Bansal also said, it's a great challenge for our teaching faculty to keep relevant also. Unless they will be able to deliver something more than the student can get on automatic platforms, I think there's a great danger to relevance. So we will have to sort of devise that. But personally, I feel a course which meets our expectations from Coursera, edX, why not? If I have to give an online course, the student opts that course from IIT Kharagpur, what is wrong in this? NPTEL course. If he can take from Swayam, what is wrong in this? Online method course could come from anywhere. So if he takes a course from MIT rather than ABC Engineering College, what objection possibly I can have on earth? Maybe I have some right for examination or assessment. And short of that, that's my take. And how far I become successful in selling this, I can't say.
Sure, sure, I understand. कैलाश जी, आपका इसमें विचार?
Ravi Saab, you know, this is a major policy decision. While I am, you know, not actually empowered to comment on the policy part of it, because this has to be carefully, and some thought is already going on. It's not that the thought is not there. Some thought is already there, but the larger policy decision has to come from the MHRD on this issue. UGC, MHRD, AICTE, all three are doing some kind of a thinking on this issue. But today, the networking platform is actually increased. It is no more competition. It is more of a collaboration. So I would rather say, why is a student required to go to Coursera? Where is the need arising from? We have to take a look at a little bit of a root cause there. If we do a little root cause analysis, because he finds that what we are teaching in our university is slightly irrelevant. Is it not so? Who's stopping to make it more relevant? If a computer network teacher can, you know, use Tannenbaum, so can he start teaching artificial intelligence and start creating routing protocols and etc. for the students to teach? So nobody says you can't teach neural networks in universities or in colleges. Who stops you? But just because the university syllabus is, or we are so hard-bounded or, you know, stuck to the syllabus pages of the books, that we actually don't think of teaching neural networks in our BE programs. So he is only going because he finds the value of neural networks from the Coursera. It is not available in the university, so he's going there. So let's not look at only Coursera as the good of all for everything. We have our universities where people have adopted good AI and ML into their this thing. There are specialized courses which are running within the universities and certain colleges, and their students don't go to Coursera or edX for taking these courses. So it's ultimately the game of relevance. It's no more going to be you know, absolutely competitive on that part. We have to be collaborative. I cannot say for sure whether there is the Coursera content can be adopted onto Swayam. That talk also is on, some kind of a thought process is going on, that why can't we migrate our courses? You see, we can make all these noises. Sitting at AICTE, I definitely will give this input to my superiors here. But ultimately, this is a little policy decision where I think it may take some time for such thinking to really fructify and evolve and ripen up. That's all.
Sure. So I think let us take our last question, because we are ending like near the end of the session. And this question is that the syllabi of most streams is too much loaded with core discipline, that there is no space for interdisciplinary approach. So are like are our regulatory bodies thinking about making our education more interdisciplinary? So that's a question. So let me request Agarwal sir on.
Uh, Ravi, I think I won't say nothing has been done, but I agree that much more is to be done. For example, we sometimes have to take the decisions in spirit. When AICT, I'm talking of technical education because most of us are from background of technical education. When they reduced the credits from 200 to 160, the spirit was not to give 40 credits holiday. Spirit was to use 40 credits in many alternative possibilities.
Yeah.
And those alternative possibilities could be to study other subjects, could be to have more intensified extracurricular activities, could be more intensified social activities. So that is what I said in my initial opening remarks also, learn to creditize everything. So, but many colleges, and now AICT can only tell that you can 160 credits will be enough to give a mechanical degree. So you utilize the students for other 40 hours judiciously. Now, if the institutions don't do that, to bring that cultural shock change will take time. But ultimately, we will have to sort of make the stakeholders aware, including the students, that these 40 hours which have been reduced from your classroom is not to loiter about on the roads, is to do something alternative which we believe will be better for you than being inside the classroom. So policy decisions are being taken, but implementation in such a large country where there are 10,000 technical institutions only, more than 40,000 colleges, and 1,000 closed universities. I mean, things will take time. And that is where I say, when I said personally, I fully agree with Kailash. Why can't our universities adopt Coursera or things like that? As a matter of fact, when I started IP University in Delhi, you were there. I was looking at the students of DU. They attend the college, and in the evening they go to NIIT. I said, why? If the students are forced to go in the evening to NIIT, I will integrate NIIT curriculum into all my courses.
Absolutely, sir.
And did that. But the point is, that is one way of doing it. But if people are not doing it, let us feel threatened. I mean, I feel some sort of voluntarily being threatened also sometimes leads to solutions. See, why students are taking Coursera? Either I change or I'll become irrelevant. So either I force myself to be relevant or I should be prepared to become irrelevant. This security of everything, whether I stay relevant or irrelevant, is something which I think is not the name of the game for the future.
Very interesting perspective that you talked about integration of NIIT into the courses itself, and which is a landmark decision in many ways. May I request Lieutenant Colonel Kailash to give your, I think, concluding remarks of the session. We are almost at the end of the session. Yeah.
Raviji, I never thought that I'll be prepared for this answer, for this question rather, but I somehow had this inkling this question will definitely come up, and hence I am prepared this time. Okay. So,
Okay.
again, as far as what are we doing with that extra 40 credits and why the 40 credits was reduced, and it's a known story. But what are we doing? Where have we enabled our environment? Well, mandatory internship. Students can be sent for mandatory internship. We have already built it into the system. The universal human value courses are going on. The societal connect courses are going on. Those are the places where students are, you are as a management of the stakeholder in the institute, you are supposed to drive the students towards that. Learning beyond the curriculum is there. You have to go see what is there, what is happening. The induction program talks about all these things. The institutes are supposed to create centers of excellence. Where is that? Why are we not doing that? I'm like, it's a pointer. When I raise one finger at you, three are towards my side. But yes, the centers of excellence are supposed to be there in the institutions at some point, at some form or the other. Maybe it may not be there in all the institutions, But maybe a group of institutions can create one center of excellence amongst themselves. They have to form a consortium. I said it's no more competitive. It has to be collaborative. As far as the interdisciplinary part is concerned, UGC has actually come out with a regulation saying that you are now, a student is now authorized double degree. You can do 2 degrees together, one in a regular course, one in an online or a distance mode. So I don't foresee a problem there in this thing. You have IGNOU where you can do distance education. Who stops you from taking a cyber security course or a PGDIS kind of a course if you're already a graduate and continue with another MTech or something like that? There is no, I mean, if the UGC has given this leeway, it is for students. We can't keep putting everything as an enabler without asking the accountability from the other side. So these issues, well, yes, what Agrawal sir is saying is absolutely right. Relevancy has to be there. But then how far enabling environment, what more enabling environment is required in the system, apart from saying that even the double degree is not permitted, 40% SWAYAM is knocking on the doors, Distal is already there. So I think somewhere we have to actually look at the other side also and demand accountability. Though I'm not a hardliner, please don't take me as a hardliner, but at times you have to actually look and demand accountability to this extent that we have enabled so far, please show us the result. So that is what I feel is also has to be considered, taken as a point of view on this issue.
Sure. Excellent inputs, Kailash Bansalji.
And may I just, sorry,
Yeah,
just
sure.
add one more thing.
Sure.
As far as creation of infrastructure is concerned, I'm like, there are a lot of listeners to this program. I just want to share one bit of more input. There is a Universal Services Obligation Fund, USOF, which is there under the Ministry of Communications and IT. There is a pilot guidelines which have been given out on 2nd March 2020, where BharatNet project, which is there as part of the umbrella project of NKN and things like that, there funding is available for exploitation and building up of the last mile connectivity, some kind of technological intervention, some business model can be evolved, where I think academic institutions can also portray their part. ITs and ITs have found specific mention there. I don't know about other colleges and other institutions. Even CPSUs can, so you can, the institutions who are there in the rural areas and who find their students in the catchment, with whatever is their catchment area, and they find that the connectivity is poor, well, they can actually send their proposal to Ministry of Communications and possibly get some funding going for building up the infrastructure there. That's it.
Sure. Let me thank our inaugural speakers, Professor K.K. Agrawal and Colonel Kailash Bansal, for excellent perspective you have given on the higher education, which is drastically changing in the post-COVID situations or in the COVID-19 situations, and how are the regulatory bodies looking at the whole situation, and how are they helping higher education institutions to handle this pandemic. And thank you, Professor Agrawal ji. Thanks for joining us. आपका आशीर्वाद हम लोगों के साथ है, and we are honored to have you. And
thank you so much.
Thank you so much
and all the
being
best.
here.
All the
Thank you
best.
so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bansal Saab. Thanks for joining us. Namaskar to you. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.